Hello everyone and welcome to Ovarian Cancer Australia's Information and Support webinar. My name is Vanessa Alford and I'm part of the support team at OCA. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. This webinar will focus on the sexual challenges and issues faced by women with ovarian cancer and the impact this may have on quality of life. We have three incredible presenters who are going to share some valuable information with you. We're extremely grateful for the funding received for this webinar from AstraZeneca. The webinar is interactive, so over the next hour, you can ask questions to the presenters by using the dark blue hand icon at the top of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of each speaker's presentation. Please note that speakers cannot address individual medical cases. If you have a particular question, please call the Ovarian Cancer Australia Information and Support line on 1300 660 334. For technical assistance during the webinar, please phone Redback Support on 1800 733 416. So I'm extremely privileged to introduce our speakers to you. Our first speaker is Dr Amanda Hordern, a leading expert who strives to lift the lid off the great taboo of sex and cancer. Amanda will discuss strategies to help you reclaim your sexual confidence and desire and boost your self-esteem and energy. Our second speaker is Tori Wood-Valentina, a postgraduate sexology student at Curtin University with expertise in lubricants. Through her years working at Passion Fruit, the sensuality shop, Tori has helped many people through various health and vaginal dryness issues. Tori will discuss the different types of lubricants and their uses. We will then hear from Amy Phillips, a 46-year-old mother of three who was diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer in 2020. Amy will share her experience and the effects that ovarian cancer and the treatment has had on her identity and self-esteem and the impact that it's had on her relationship with her husband of nearly 20 years. So I'd like to hand over the microphone to Dr. Amanda Hordern. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And welcome, a huge welcome to tonight's great topic. It's very exciting to be able to talk about it in an honest and open and warm way. The thing is, we're bombarded about sexuality wherever we go. I mean, sex sells white goods. It's hard to work out what this woman's actually selling, whether it's a big turkey or that deodorant, but it's all around us. And no matter where we look, we're bombarded by the images that are wrinkle-free, pube-free, disease-free, scar-free, flab-free. And as we go to images like this one, where it's hard to wonder what on earth she is selling, most of us are wondering, has she got a G-string on? And we will never know the answer. But when we have these superficial images all around us, bus stops, magazines, advertising of all different sorts, it's hard for each of us as mere humans to think of ourselves as sexual beings when we're older, when we've been through diseases and health challenges like many of you have here today. This beautiful photo was sent to me from a New Zealand palliative care hospice where I went and spoke to the nurses in palliative care, one of the greatest taboos about worrying about sexuality and intimacy in the moments that you have left in life. And the family said to me, via this nurse, said the one thing that their mum wanted to do was to be able to just lie back in a warm bubble bath, have a no disturb sign on the door for half an hour, and to have a tiara, something that she thought she was entitled to receive. And they said that she actually did die with a beautiful smile on her face. So sexuality is all around us, and it's experienced and expressed in our thoughts, in our fantasies, in our desires, in our belief, our attitudes, our values. This is a really great World Health Organization definition of sexuality is pretty much whatever you want it to be. I always have a little bit of a chuckle when I think about the World Health Organization sitting around a bureaucratic table just trying to decide what it is. 2002 was the last definition. And what we really know is it means different things to different people at different stages of our life. So all of you listening to this today and this evening will have a different definition of what sex means to you right now and what you do want to change. And it's way beyond sexual penetration. And I'm going to call on the wonderful OCA research that was just published only a couple of weeks ago. So some of your quotes may have been captured in this, saying that it's more than penetration. It's about our values. As this woman said, I try and keep our sex life going because I know how important it is for my partner. The other one says, my husband pulls away every time I get bad news. So it involves our communication as well as our values. And it involves how we feel about ourselves as a woman. I don't feel the least bit feminine or care about my appearance like I used to, said another woman. I have no ovaries, so I feel less of a woman. So it affects the way we feel ourselves in a gender way, as well as in a way that we socialise with other people. As this beautiful, very moving quote said, it's just like a lump. I've grown a lump of death, and it was very hard, and I've become socially withdrawn. So as we focus on these quotes, which I'm bombarded with quite often in research and in my own clinical practice, that for some people, sex just becomes a job that I must perform. Well, that's what they usually come to me for. Other people say, I just hate the way I look and feel. I mean, look at my hair and look at my body and look at my weight gain. One woman said to me, I thought you were supposed to wither away when you got cancer, and look at all this. This is the cancer. Other people have said to me quite often, men and women, I cannot even look in the mirror. Some people cover the mirror up and try and remove and get a shock if they're actually seeing their reflection in a passing shop window. Whereas other people have worked out a way to say that these scars are a lifeline. And this was a beautiful quote that also came from the OCA research. So what do people want to know after cancer, and how does that relate to intimacy and sexuality? Well, from the intimacy and sexuality perspective, most people are saying, how do I deal with these changes in my body, in my mind, in my energy, in my libido, in my focus? And is it even okay to worry about how I look when I should be so grateful and thankful to the medical people who have kept me alive? Will I ever feel sexy again is what I'm often asked. And how do other people cope in these situations, which is why it's so fantastic to have this forum here today. How do I move forward when I feel so stuck and overwhelmed and bombarded and just burdened by all that's happened since my ovarian cancer? And are there practical strategies that I can put in place today that will assist me to just move forward and feel less stuck and open my mind and my body to a hope? And the answer is yes, there are. Well, we've learned from a lot of the research in older people facing cancer, and I've learned this from a lot of women in the lesbian support groups that we used to run at the Cancer Council, was that as we grow older, we have more capacity to become more comfortable in our body and in our mind, and to explore new erogenous zones and ways of expressing intimacy. If that's what we want in our mind, then our body can start to follow. But the problem is that, as this wonderful man, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist, said in one of his books, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and You Are the Placebo Effect, he said the problem is that most of us each and every day, we get out of bed the same way, we brush our teeth the same way, we brush our hair, we put our makeup on the same way, we push the coffee machine the same way. So our brain is always fired for cue, trigger and response, cue, trigger and response. And a lot of his research is showing that mostly 60 to 70,000 thoughts are what we have per day, and about 90% of them are repeated every day, again and again and again. And that's okay if our thoughts are working for us rather than against us. But what I learned in counselling decades and decades ago, when a woman just threw these books to wake me up out of my dazed state as a student, she said, well, 90% of your clients' issues are going to be in the past, and only 10% of them about today. So often we're operating on unconscious habits, programs, and thought viruses that can just mobilize us. And then we have the cancer layer on top of that. So what do I mean by that? We've often got a very loud me, an inner critic that's always saying bad things about ourselves. And what we come to realize from counseling and from hypnotherapy and neuro-linguistic programming is that 90% of that can happen from the school ground. It can happen from being bullied, having a mean teacher, having a very traumatic relationship breakdown. So our past can often govern how you're feeling about the cancer today and how your potential then to unblock or to unstick yourself from a lot of the beliefs and habits and behaviours and patterns that weren't even yours to carry. So the good news about this is that we can start to, or what happens is we're often thinking the top two things, what if I'm no good at sex, and what if I disappoint my partner, which you saw in a lot of those themes that I was showing from our own research at the OCA. What if my body lets me down? What if I make things worse for my relationship with myself, for my body, for my cancer? Will I ever get back to who I was? Are the constant themes that come into my clinical practice. And the truth is that most of those thoughts operate from a place of fear. And of course, it's often very burdensome and hard work to actually not only get over the shock and the trauma and the high hypervigilance that can happen in the cancer experience of just going treatment after treatment and bad news after bad news. So often our brain starts to just be on that high alert, like just waiting for the next bad news or waiting for the next bit of information or the next word that you don't understand in the cancer experience. And so FEAR can quite simply stand for false expectation appears real. But like Susan Jeffries said in her book way back in the 80s, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And she said, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's working out that there's something much more important than the fear, and that will align you to making a different choice in your brain, and your body will follow. So what she was really saying is we can all of us have the choice to stay in this space if that serves you, if that suits you, and if that's okay with you, and mostly if it's okay with you and or your partner. But we can flip the fear and we can start to think about not what you don't want, but what you do want. So when people come into my practice as a sexual counsellor, or with the new role that I'm playing at the OCA as a sexual counsellor, I'm often bombarded by a shopping list of everything that they don't want. Low energy, low libido, problems with intimacy, feeling really bad about the body, not even interested, not in desire, letting partnerships down. And so compassionately, of course, I listen to that, and then I just take a big deep breath and I say, just for a second, if we could just put that aside for a moment, what would you really like to focus on here today? What would you want to put energy into? Because energy flows where attention goes. How will you know when you have that? What will that outcome allow you to be, to do, to feel? So rather than what you don't want, we're trying to shift the focus to what you do want and how that will serve you and how that will bring joy or happiness or peace and acceptance into your body. Some of the other things that we work on over a series of often 3 to 6 sessions is just bringing people out of their brain of that hypervigilance and high alert of more bad news and more difficulties and challenges in the health spectrum from the ovarian cancer, to just teaching people how to breathe back into their body. And that allows us to get out of our head brain and into our body. Often that needs a little bit of guidance, and we do practical kind of reinforcement strategies that can help you along the way. The other thing to do is trying to allow people, it's moving from what you don't want to just bringing more and more of the joy back from the head into the body. So in sex therapy and sex counseling, there are classic kind of steps that we walk you through where it's called sensate focus techniques, where we're just shifting from the horror and the fear and the trauma of all that you've been grappling with and the overload and the overwhelm to just coming back into the body, to get comfortable with scars, to dress up or dress down, to play with lube that Tori's going to talk to you about, to explore different textures and different vibrations and sensations on the skin. So in fact, from a neuro-linguistic and neuroplastic modality, it's to reignite and reconnect with the body and the mind. And to rebuild the sexual awareness, one of the biggest steps that we often say to people, why don't we put the intercourse goal off the radar for now, if it is one of your goals, and just focus on starting to be feeling more comfortable and more courageous and more confident in your body. How do we do that? I try and find out from people before all of this happened, what used to make you laugh? What used to make you feel connected with a partner if you happen to have one? If you are looking for a partner, what are the kind of qualities that you would like to have now? Not what you don't want, but what you do want. And obviously setting the scene with the mind of changing the lighting, putting music on, having warmth in the body, and trying to remind people that you're not being marked on this, that have a go yourself. And then if you have a partner, if you choose to invite a partner into your sensual and intimate space, then you can guide them as to what feels comfortable and what is actually feeling aroused or just slightly interesting or curious in the body as a new pathway from the mind to the body. So what we're really saying is that we're trying to step people through not what you don't want, but what you do want. So being less critical of yourself. Sometimes my clients really beat themselves up with those negative thought viruses and the things they say about themselves. And after I've heard a few of them, I just say, just stop and just repeat that to yourself again. Would you ever say that to a friend? Would you ever say that to somebody who you really love? And of course, the answer is always no. I would never do that. I would never speak to somebody like that. So it's trying to focus on things that you feel grateful for. And there's lots of positive psychology that shows that by starting the day and ending the day with 3 things that you feel grateful for, quite literally starts to shift the focus to some of the things that you have in your power to change. Other activities that I say to clients when they're really overwhelmed and exhausted, like many of you may be tonight, let's just download a huge list of all that's going on in your head for the next minute. So we put the stopwatch on for a minute, right, or you tell me and I'll write for you. And then I hand it back to them and I say, okay, let's put a red line through everything that you have no control over. And it's a really effective technique of working out what you have power over and what you don't have power over. Because energy flows where attention goes. And if you move from overwhelm to what you do have power over, you're more likely to make one change that will lead to another and lead to another. The other thing that I say to people is let's focus, even if that's one of your end goals of what you'd like, what are some of the micro goals along the way, the micro steps? I think it was Confucius who said a long time ago that, you know, every journey of 1,000 miles begins with one foot after the other. So it's one breath after the other, one stroke after the other, one step after the other. Allowing yourself to have a good support system around you is a fundamental thing just to lower anxiety. And even allowing yourself to ask for and receive help is a thing that many, many women in society struggle with, and especially when you're very vulnerable and feeling very exhausted as well. So what I'm really trying to say over the last couple of minutes is that sexuality means different things to each of you who are listening to this now. And so if sexuality and intimacy is a priority, it's working out what you do want and starting to chunk that down into a couple of manageable steps, working with a therapist, working with somebody who's got some experience to assist you to break it down and to start to move out of the head that's traumatized and back into your body until you can start to feel a spark of possibility. What we know from some of the amazing research that's out there with a lot of the MRIs now is that if you can conceive something mentally, there's incredible research that I can always, Professor Beverly Whipple taught us this, that women can have full-blown orgasms just by conceiving something in their minds, and they can have a full-blown orgasm under an MRI. What the research also showed that a lot of the people who they did research on in Professor Beverly Whipple's studies were deemed to be unable to orgasm or to be stimulated because many of them were quadriplegics. So we now know that if we can conceive something mentally and if we can light up new and, sparking areas in the body, then not when you're exhausted, and experiment with new positions and set the goal for pleasure rather than performance, then you're more likely to find the fun and the joy back in that. So in summary, because we've all got a very strict timeline here, it's about working with your strengths. So working out what you do like. And there was a beautiful woman who very bravely put her hand up at the end of one of my seminars. And she said, you know, it's exactly what you were saying, that sex is way more than penetration. And so it was a big audience, 500 people. And she said, do you want to know what sex is for us? And I must confess that we all kind of breathed in and just waited for her answer. And her husband was just poking her in the ribs like this, winking at her like this. And she said, we just close our eyes every morning for 3 minutes a day, and we breathe in together and we breathe out together, and we breathe in together and we breathe out together. And for 3 minutes a day, that's what sexuality means to us. And then we get on with our day and we feel deeply connected. The funny thing about the story was that he came and said to me later, the truth is it's the only way to keep her quiet for 3 minutes a day. But he said it was such love, and he went running, literally skipping off into the sunset, holding her hand. So it's not selfish to focus on you first. And there's some wonderful resources. The OCA, beautiful book, the, Body Image, Relationships and Ovarian Cancer book that just got released. There's a Cancer Council one on fertility, which I was also involved in writing. And there's this fantastic Teal support program that all of you know about. I've just come to get to know it. That's my timer to say stop. And I'm now recently been appointed as the sex therapist for the sessions. So I look forward to speaking to you if that's something that you'd like to work through some of these sessions as well. Thanks for your time, and look forward to your questions now. Thank you, Vanessa.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. Amazing how much you can fit in 15 minutes. But what an extremely informative presentation. Thank you so much. And we are so fortunate to have you, the OCA, to have you as our sexual counsellor. So very, very fortunate indeed. We just have one question How does our mind get in the way of our desires?
Well, it's a good question. It nearly always gets in the way of our desires, and it's pretty much what we were saying. It's the fear, the false expectation appears real, or the actual drama, the facts that have been laid up until this point. So it's the focus of the brain on what we don't want rather than what we do want. And even when I teach that in communication skills, even all of us, we get fixated on what we don't want, what isn't working, what if I stuff it up, what if I get it wrong, fear of failure. So the biggest thing is to just change the mind to something, even if it's one micro or macro step forward, that can work for somebody, that can quite literally open up the brain to new possibilities, and it starts to think, what next? You know, it's more suggestible and more open to a new lived experience, whatever that might be for you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. Really appreciate your time this evening.